think I look very serious on this picture. I'm always happy if I see the picture that I do not wear the same tie and the same suit, because otherwise it would look a bit funny. Good evening, everyone. And it's an honor to be here today. Thank you, Rector, for inviting me, Mr. Mayor, Regional Minister, students. It's wonderful to see you all. The future of Europe. That is what brings us together tonight. The future we share, your future. And let me be frank from the outset, we live in challenging times. And the European Union stands at a historic crossroads. There is a great deal of work to be done to prepare the Union for the future. To put the problems into focus, our security is under serious threat because of Russia's war of aggression on our continent. Our economic performance is not where it needs to be. We are too dependent on others for energy and critical raw materials. We are lagging behind on innovation, weighed down by the regulatory burden. And what's more, we face serious challenges when it comes to our freedoms and our values. Democratic principles can no longer be taken for granted, even within the European Union. And the international rules-based order is being openly challenged. And this may not be the most cheerful way to start the evening, but this is where we stand. This is the reality we face. And this is the context in which quite a number of you start your European Studies program. To be honest, I admire your courage. After all, the aim of your course is, in the elegant phrasing of your university's website, to contribute to solving the political and societal challenges of today's Europe. But in all seriousness, it is more important than ever that we have students who are preparing themselves for that task, who want to engage with these issues. The European Union is worth investing in. It has brought us a great deal, and we can continue to benefit from it every day. And I'm sure you will also find it hugely rewarding. As a former member of the European Parliament, I may be slightly biased, but the EU is a fascinating topic. So I wish you every success in your studies. The European Union will look different by the time you complete your studies. It has to. Fundamental reforms are necessary to ensure that the European Union can meet the challenges of the future. If the Union stands still, it will be left behind. We will lose out in a world where major powers outside Europe call the shots. So the European Union must focus on the major challenges we face with real determination. The first steps have been taken, but we must go further. In concrete terms, we need to invest heavily in at least 4 key areas: safeguarding our security, boosting EU competitiveness, defending our values, and reforming the Union. I'll come back to each of these points later. But first, I want to stress that all these changes are not only necessary, they're perfectly possible. At its core, the entire European project carries the promise of transformation. And to understand this, it may be useful to zoom out and take a quick look at the long history of Europe. A quick look. This city, Maastricht, bears witness to that history in many places. For centuries, countless wars raged across our continent. Against that historical backdrop, the peace we have known in Europe over the past few decades has been exceptional. And it's all because of a decision we took after the devastating world wars of the 20th century. We said, enough is enough. Things must change, and they can change. That conviction is what inspired the European project. Since then, building the European Union has always been a work in progress. European cooperation has evolved over time, sometimes in fits and starts, and it has become broader and deeper. In 1992, the 12 member states of what was then the European communities laid the foundations for a stronger European Union. In fact, they did it near here, just over the John F. Kennedy Bridge at the Gouvernement aan de Maas. Since the Treaty of Maastricht was signed, the European Union has continued to grow. and its architecture has evolved too. In 2007, for example, the Treaty of Lisbon implemented a set of major reforms. The aim was to ensure that the EU could continue to function effectively, even with a large increase in the number of member states. And we need the same spirit now, the same courage to change. First, as I said, because of our security. War has returned to our continent. In 2014, Russia invaded the Ukrainian region of Crimea, which was followed by hostilities in Donbass. 4 years ago, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And since then, many thousands of brave Ukrainians have lost their lives, their loved ones, and their homes. And it's not a war that is far away. It also affects other member states. It affects us. Our country suffered a brutal blow in July 2014 with the downing of flight MH17. Russia is responsible for the deaths of 298 people on board, including 196 Dutch nationals. And the conflict has also reached our country in the form of hybrid warfare, cyber attacks, disinformation, sabotage. Russia is trying to weaken European countries internally and undermine support for Ukraine. And we must not be under any illusion. The Russian threat will not simply end once the war in Ukraine is over. At the same time, the United States has made clear that Europe must take more responsibility for its own security. Maybe the tone of that message is now different, but it's a message that Washington, with its pivot to Asia, has been emphasizing for a long time. So we've got to bolster our defenses, not simply to meet America's demands, but because it's a task that we've neglected far too long. We have to take responsibility for our own security, and we must do it urgently. Within the next 4 years, we need to establish a robust European security architecture based on a strong NATO, a strong EU, and effective partnerships. Within NATO, the EU must take responsibility for the lion's share of its own conventional defense. And this will require great perseverance. It will come at a cost for all of us. Freedom never comes free. The second major task facing Europe is to strengthen our competitiveness. Our economies are facing enormous challenges. Consider the significant job losses across Germany, particularly in the automotive industry. In this sector alone, employment has fallen by more than 40,000 jobs compared with a year earlier, a decline of almost 6%. Across the German manufacturing sector as a whole, almost 150,000 jobs were lost over the same period. This is partly due to the enormous lead that China is building in this sector. We see this all over Europe. In the Netherlands, we're seeing chemical plants closing down. And we don't know yet where these developments will lead. But it seems like a storm is brewing, so we cannot just stand idly by. We need a laser focus on boosting innovation and reducing the regulatory burden. We need to use our resources and materials more sustainably and sparingly. And we need to accelerate the production of clean energy. It's also essential to steadily reduce our high-risk dependencies when it comes to critical raw materials and technologies. The war in Ukraine has shown us all how important this is. After Russia's invasion, we saw energy bills rise, and we were confronted with our vulnerability as a result of our dependence on Russian gas and the leverage that this gave Russia. We're already hard at work to become less dependent, but this will remain a top priority in the years ahead. In concrete terms, this will mean more collaboration with the EU, forging new partnerships, for example, with countries in Asia and Africa. Our ability to operate in the world depends on the strength of our own position. Without a strong economy, we cannot build strong defenses. And without technological leadership, Europe will remain highly dependent on other major powers. These priorities should be visible in the EU's spending, and they must be reflected in the EU's new multi-annual financial framework. Our third key task is to protect the very core of what it means to be European, our values. Europe stands for democracy, the rule of law, the protection of minorities, media freedom, equal rights for all. That is what defines us. That is why it's deeply concerning to see democracy coming under growing pressure, even within the European Union itself. And to safeguard our shared values, we must ensure that every member state meets our clear and common minimum standards. We've had experience of member states flouting democratic norms. We've learned our lesson. So if member states fall below the agreed threshold, we must take firm action against them. For example, we can work to prevent rule of law backsliding by more firmly establishing the available options, such as suspending the allocation of EU funds. For new member states, we are proposing extra safeguards on the rule of law in the accession treaties. In addition to measures like this, preparations are well on the way for setting up the European Democracy Shield, an initiative intended to strengthen our democratic values and enabling member states and candidate countries to work together to tackle issues like foreign interference and disinformation. With steps like these, we have in fact already entered the terrain of the reforms that are needed within the European Union. That's the fourth key area I mentioned. Over the years, the European Union has grown from 6 member states to today's 27. And that number will likely continue to grow, with several candidate countries now working their way through the accession process. Bigger families need a different level of organization. And so the Union will have to be reorganized in order to remain strong and effective. First of all, it's important to acknowledge that a bigger Union can move at different speeds. We have to pick up the pace when it comes to crucial areas. We do not have the luxury to wait until all of the EU member states are ready, because the rest of the world won't wait for us. This means that we will increasingly need to work through lead groups of member states that are ready to move ahead together, sometimes joined by non-EU members like the United Kingdom and Norway. We can already see this approach taking shapes in areas such as capital markets, joint defense procurements, migration. The Netherlands is also participating in various of these lead groups that are exploring reforms to make the EU stronger, to make it more effective. For example, in the area of enlargement. Sometimes to prevent enlargement from weakening the Union, which tend to be sometimes the main focus, but also to make the EU more attractive to strong new partners like Norway and Iceland. Let me mention a few of the reforms we're proposing. We can make the Union more effective by moving from unanimity to qualified majority decision-making in parts of the EU's common foreign policy. We need to revise our veto system, so that in times when we need to stand strong together, the veto cannot be used as a tool for blackmail, as we've seen in recent years. As a first step, we could temporarily limit the right of veto for acceding countries via the accession treaties. The bottom line is clear. Enlargement has to strengthen the Union as a whole. That's why we must be strict, but also fair and engaged. The Copenhagen criteria are not only about the requirements that acceding countries must meet, they also address the EU's absorption capacity. In other words, we need to make sure that the candidate countries are ready to join the Union, but also that the Union is ready to welcome them. That's why we're proposing a phased accession process for new member states, with extra safeguards and transitional arrangements in the accession treaties. We're now actively discussing these different options with the Commission and other member states. I'd like to make some specific remarks on Ukraine in particular. An intensive accession process still lies ahead, in which Ukraine will have to implement an extensive reform agenda, not in the least when it comes to the rule of law and the fight against corruption. But I want to stress also that Ukraine's accession is of great importance to European security. As far as the Dutch government is concerned, Ukraine's future is irrefutably in the European Union. For more than 12 years, the Ukrainians have demonstrated that they will stand up to Russia's expansionist aims. I have great admiration for their resilience and their courage. During my visits to Ukraine, I've witnessed these qualities firsthand. The Ukrainians continue to stand firm in the face of daily airstrikes by missiles and drones all over the country. Millions of Ukrainians now live under oppression in Russian-occupied territory. And it's important to bear in mind that Putin won't stop. The Ukrainians are fighting for our security too. They're fighting for all of Europe, for our security, democracy, and for our values and protecting our way of life. I'm also convinced that we will truly need Ukraine in the future. With its army and defense industry, Ukraine now has an ultra-modern combat force, which all of Europe learns from and benefits from too. That is why Ukraine could also be a valuable addition to NATO. Dear students, ladies and gentlemen, only a few steps from this place, you will find a statue of someone you may know from the Three Musketeers film. His name was Count d'Artagnan, musketeer of the guard of Louis XIV of France, the Sun King. D'Artagnan was killed in Maastricht during the Franco-Dutch War in the 17th century, a long conflict between France and the Republic of the Seven United Netherlands. His statue displays the musketeers' motto, tous pour un pour tous, all for one and one for all. I think those are fine words with which to conclude my speech today. The EU member states don't always have the same interests, but in crucial areas we bolster one another. Together we are strong and capable of achieving great things. So I'm optimistic about the EU's future. At the same time, I realize that a secure, strong, and effective European Union won't simply fall into our lap. The EU faces a historic challenge. Will we stay strong under increasing pressure? Will our values hold? Will we be able to defend and sustain ourselves? Fortunately, the future is not something that simply happens to us. It is something we can actively shape. That's why the Netherlands is pursuing this aim so energetically, a fitting role for one of the founding members of the European Union and its predecessors. We helped lay the EU's foundations, and today we're helping to drive it forward with ideas on how to do things differently. And you, especially the students, can help to shape the EU's future, not least by contributing the knowledge, skills, and insights you will gain here in the years ahead. I invite you to also think in new directions, to challenge the status quo, because this is about your future, the future we share. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berendsen. Thank you very much for that inspiring speech, but also coming to Maastricht on the very first day that many of these students take their classes here, European Studies, European Law School, European Public Health, and getting really a type of insight from you. The colleagues are putting together now our table, so I invite you to take a seat. Then I can ask you a couple of questions on the basis of that speech. So I have some questions prepared, but then afterwards we also turn to the audience, because I'm particularly curious to hear from our students and from all the other guests that we have here. I think there was a lot to admire, I think, in your speech. But I'm also looking at it from a type of student perspective. 25 years ago when I was a student, or you were a student here as well. And many of the students come to Maastricht to study European studies simply because they want to understand the type of complex system that's the European Union, and it's working with the member states. But I think also a lot of the students here in the audience, they come to Maastricht because they're worried about Europe. They just don't just want to learn about Europe, they want to do something about it. Now, I think most of the people in this audience agreed with your analysis of the problem, the challenges that there are, that we need to focus on security, competitiveness, and so forth. But I'm wondering whether the type of solutions you offer, the type of reforms, whether they are really enough. Are they meeting the historic moment, or do we need a sea change, a new type of paradigm? What should be our level of ambition when it comes to thinking about the EU?
Yeah. Well, first of all, obviously, I agree with everything I said in my speech. So that is the basis. That is the basis of it. What I try to do is point out to those areas where our government thinks is the real priority at the moment. And I'm sure many of you know that we're at the moment in the discussions on the MFF, and everyone knows that the money decides what you do. I mean, that's the basis for policy as well. And I think it starts there. So in the EU, whether it's the member states or the European Parliament, we're very good at setting new priorities, but we're very bad at saying goodbye to old priorities. And the world is changing. And in any way, we have limited resources, which means you need to focus on the big areas. That's one. Secondly, when you look at, well, for example, the veto, as I mentioned, but you can also look into, how much of the funds are dedicated to new member states, etc. You would need treaty change to solve everything right away. But treaty change is also some kind of Pandora's box, because you don't know where you end up, and you don't know where there's complete agreement. Which means that our way of thinking is, what can we do? And that is to solve something already for candidate member states within accession treaties that we cannot solve yet because we need it. If you want to solve it, you need it via a treaty change. But that's all, of course, those are details. What I do agree with you is that the moment we are living in now really demands Europe to act. But it's not only in these kind of reforms, it's not only where we spend our money on, it's about whether we believe in moving forward together, or whether we let ourselves being divided by the big powers around us. And I think that's the major challenge we will be facing. Do we stick together and stay strong, or do we let us divide us? And if we're divided, we will be weak anyway.
Good, so it's not just in the type of nitty-gritty details, removing part of the veto in foreign policy, but only for candidate countries that join in 2028. It's also about the broader message. We are in this together. Okay, I think that's very important. I picked up on your points on competitiveness. Now, competitiveness is perhaps not the topic you win votes for, or
Did you notice that I gave the first speech about Europe in years without mentioning Draghi?
And Draghi is the talk of the day, right? I mean, he started a new type of Rhine group with a lot of Dutch people involved as well. So I think it is a good moment to talk about competitiveness. And I know you did quite a lot of work in the European Parliament on this topic as well. And you rightly mentioned it. Obviously, there's Draghi, but I think Draghi analyzed very nicely the type of lack of economic growth, lack of productivity in Europe, lack of research in investment. I think also education. I'm particularly worried about falling PISA scores, the level of writing, mathematics in high school, in the Netherlands, Belgium, but across Europe. So we're failing behind there. But I'm just wondering what direction you want to take Europe in, because it seems to me in your speech you say two things. On the one hand, you brought us to the question of competing on the world market, and we are hampered by a regulatory burden. Those were your words, regulatory burden. So we need to remove this regulatory burden. We need to be relevant internationally. We need to compete, right? We should be able to compete with China, and we should be able to compete with the Americans. Yet, on the other hand, there was also part of your speech was about essentially protecting the European economy, putting up a little wall. You talked about the German car industry. So type of strategic autonomy, avoiding dependence, and de-risking. Now, these things are not entirely the same, right? Being competitive on the world market, being able to be there with the best, versus a Europe that protects, that closes it off from the world economy. So what vision on competitiveness do you appreciate most?
Well, I think we need everything. And we need a combination of that. So first of all, and you rightly point out, skills are crucial. You know, our new workforce, innovation, that is crucial for the future. Secondly, fair competition is also crucial, because we have high demands when it comes to, for example, sustainable production of companies in Europe, with the ETS system, with other regulations in place. But they need to compete on a world market with other companies that do not have to live up to the same kind of rules. So if we want them to be ambitious, if we demand them to be ambitious, they deserve our protection as well when it comes to unfair competition. I think a third important thing is investments. So there is enough money in Europe, but the problem is that once a startup, 1 out of 3, I think 2 out of 3 startups that become a bit bigger, they move to the United States because they get easier access to capital there. There is enough money in Europe, but therefore we need an Italian investor being able to invest in a Dutch company, or a Dutch investor into a Polish company. But we still have boundaries there in our capital markets. That's why the Netherlands is an active member of a lead group on saying, listen, if we cannot move fast enough with 27, then at least we will start with 6, 7, 8 countries to build that capital market to make sure that we have the investment available. And the fourth one, and you hear that also from our companies, is that the regulatory burden is very high in Europe. And it's not because of a bad intention. It's not because of policymakers want to give companies a lot of rules. It's all about good intentions, sustainable production, cleaner production, care for the environment, for the works, etc. But if you add everything up on the European level, and then also member states themselves with also good ideas try to add up that to existing regulation, for companies it's very difficult, very time-consuming, very costly to live up to those rules. So I think those are 4 areas where we need to move forward, and in essence we need to do that in cooperation with the countries in Europe, but also with like-minded countries in the world.
But are we also, in terms of competitiveness, ready to make choices? That perhaps we say, to put it quite bluntly, the car industry is not the most important thing. We're going to focus on digital and clean energy. Do we dare to make those choices as well?
I think you should also always be a bit hesitant in choosing which companies or which sectors. The ability of politicians to look into the future of business and business models, they can do that better. What I think that our task is to build the right basis for businesses to build their companies on. For example, the energy price in the Netherlands is twice as high as in Germany and Belgium. And for all of Europe, in China, energy is much cheaper, and the US is much cheaper. So we need to start with producing more clean energy. Way more clean energy, not only because of the business cost of our company for them to be competitive, but also for combating climate change, second one, but also from strategic reasons, because we're very dependent on fossil fuels that come from other parts of the world. So the best thing we can do on all these issues is to produce more clean energy ourselves. That doesn't consist of choice of direction, but that means that you have a basis where we can build on. And I think that we sometimes, yes, so digital is crucial. New technology is crucial. But we should not forget that these basic industries, chemicals, for example, you need it everywhere. And the problem is that if we say, let's do it somewhere else, we'll buy it from somewhere else, they can do it cheaper somewhere else, we will again have something where we're more dependent on other parts of the world, and we know how dependencies can be used against us.
Okay, very clear. Now, I know that many in the audience are also particularly excited about the topic of EU enlargement, and I think that was your fourth point, enlargement and institutional reform. So I want to talk a little bit more to you about that. Now, in your speech, you mentioned phased accession, stage accession, and you suggested transitional arrangement safeguards. Now, they're obviously sensible and they're also not new, right? I mean, the 2004 enlargement, they were there as well, on freedom of movement, on caps on agriculture, regional funds, and so forth. Sensible, they're good for the countries ultimately in the long run, but I do worry about the type of message that sends. Because I think when listening to your speech, for these candidate countries, you essentially provided a whole range of additional criteria on rule of law, on the veto, and so forth. And that does sense a bit of the idea that you're second-class countries, and it reduces the type of hopes and aspirations also of people living in these countries. Now, I always thought, when thinking of phased accession, state accession, that it's not just about adding criteria, but also about thinking of front-loading some of the benefits of enlargement. A lot of countries want to join the EU because there are a lot of benefits. Well, let's not wait all the way until the end, until you're a member, but let's give some of these benefits to some of these countries now already, and then there are obviously the other criteria as well. So could you perhaps think of some of the benefits that we could give to countries like Moldova, countries in the Western Balkans, of course Ukraine as well. Does Ukraine deserve a seat at the table in the Council when you're talking about European security, for instance?
I will answer that question. Remind me, because I do want to say something about how we see enlargement and the approach of the Dutch government. So, as I mentioned in the speech, we say we're strict, we're fair and engaged, which means we're strict on the criteria. And we don't want to give up on those criteria. We're very strict to that. But we're also fair that when a country meets certain criteria, we need to move ahead. So you don't make it political. If they meet the criteria, you move ahead. And thirdly, we're engaged, which means that we work together with candidate countries to help them achieve criteria. It's something we do, for example, with Ukraine very intensely. So that's one, that's crucial. Secondly, when it comes to the accession treaties, we try to, you want to make the European Union more effective. For some things we need treaty change, but at least we can solve it in accession treaties for new candidate members, new member states. For example, the veto, we can give up on the veto if we agree by unanimity that we give up on the veto. That's a difficult direction to go. But at least we can temporarily make sure that new member states do not have that same kind of right on veto. Is it a difference with existing member states? Yes. Is it sensitive? Yes. Is it needed to make the European Union more effective? Also yes, at least in our view. We also indeed say that you can look into ways to make candidate members benefit from cooperation with the European Union. There are various possibilities. But for example, roaming. For us, it's nowadays it's completely logical and normal. But I mean, we're from the days that if you went to Belgium, suddenly you need to watch out whether how much, and especially in this region, that must have been a huge problem. Those kind of benefits. Also, in Ukraine, of course, in the defense industry, we're cooperating a lot. Ukraine is already in part of the conversations we also have on our security. So yes, those benefits are important. And one last remark on lead groups. So I do not think that we will have a European Union with different directions and it stays like that. Those lead groups, where the Netherlands is actively participating in, are meant to inspire the rest of the European Union to follow that direction. Maybe at a speed that that is less fast or it's later in time, but that's the direction we want to go. We move and we aspire others to follow that as well.
Okay, a final question. does the Ukrainian foreign minister deserve in the council a seat at the table when European security is discussed? Is that something that we can already arrange as an observer, for instance, that they're really part of, that we're not talking about them, that they're part of our discussions?
It's a practical situation that is already the case now. So he's attending many of the meetings in part. I think it's an interesting idea, but at the same time, you also need to be aware of the fact that there are a few other countries that would want to have the same then. And how do you deal with that? So, but these are the kind of ideas we're open to discuss and see what works best. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you so much for answering my questions. And I think it's now time to move to our audience. Before you all raise your hands, just a moment on procedure. When you registered for today, we asked you to whether you have a question for the minister. Now, quite a few of you already had a question for the minister. So I'm going to call out a couple of you in the audience who have prepared a question so that we have a nice range. And afterwards, we fully open up. So I just want to ask first Tamara Urigova. Is Tamara Urigova somewhere? She's sitting over here. Can we get her a microphone? She's from Slovakia, and she has submitted a question.
Can I just say that I'm very impressed that the first-year students that are now going through their introductory week, I'm not sure whether I would have been able during my introductory week to be here. So I'm very impressed. You have a very good future in front of you.
Tamara.
Thank you very much. This evening is about the future of Europe principally, but in your speech you also refer to the past and how we came here. So essentially my question relates to that, like what, in your opinion, historical events or experiences most shape the current thinking, philosophy and functioning of the European Union, and what we can learn moving forward from what we've already experienced?
I think, the European Union has been built on crisis. So I don't wish us more crisis, but you do see that in times of crisis, when it was about the euro crisis, when it was about COVID, when it was about the energy crisis, the security crisis we're in now, there you see the real political will and possibility to move forward together. And if you look throughout history, that's, essentially, starting the European Union. Starting the European cooperation was built on the end of the Second World War. So somehow we need crisis to move ahead. When we all feel the urgency strong enough, to be able to pass a certain barrier that in normal relaxing times is there. I would wish us a bit more of that urgency in less times of crisis, without a crisis. But I think the honest answer is that crisis, European Union has been built on crisis. Yeah.
And for you personally, if there's a historical event that shaped your worldview, if you have to pick out one.
Ooh. That's a difficult. I think the first answer that pops into my mind is actually the crisis we're going through now. I think the Russian threat and the threat of the dependencies we have on global powers that are reshaping the world order. I think that is also in my role now, but also in my role as member of the European Parliament, is really deciding and shaping the way I look at the European Union and European cooperation.
All right. I have now also Tessel Wettler. Tessel is over there from the Netherlands, who has a question as well for the Minister.
Thank you very much. My name is Tessel. Thank you. I'm not a student at the University of Maastricht, but I'm a student at Zuid University of Applied Science in my fourth year European Studies. You served as an MEP for the EPP group, and now as Minister of Foreign Affairs. what are the most differences and most remarkable things you have experienced in both fields, and what makes that division, since you have now two very different roles in two very different institutions, and you work now with the EPP in a different view?
That's a very good question. I can talk about hours about that. I won't do that, of course. So a couple of differences. So one, as a Minister of Foreign Affairs, I'm exclusively defending the national Dutch interest. At the same time, I'm a firm believer that a strong Europe and good cooperation with the countries around us is in our interest. Secondly, our Tweede Kamer, our national parliament, is completely different than the European Parliament. In the European Parliament, you do not have debates, really. So you have statement by statement by statement, and then 50 in a row, and that's the debate. In the national parliament in the Netherlands, it's completely different. And the third big difference is that as a member of the European Parliament, you work week after week, month after month, on a topic to bring it a little bit further and to try to somehow get something on the agenda, to push it further. For example, as a member of the European Parliament, I was very worried about foreign interference in our European ports. I said there needs to be a European port strategy. We need to face that challenge together. And after 5 years, there was a European port strategy presented by the European Commission. So it takes a lot of time. As a minister, you have situations where you're in a room, something happens, you get advice, they look at you, and you need to decide. So somehow you have more influence. At the same time, on a European international level, it's the same as in the European Parliament. You need to cooperate. You need to understand not only let me put it differently. In the Netherlands, or in whatever country you come from, when you're in politics and someone from another political party says something, you know where it comes from. You know the historical context, you know the political context, etc. So you're able to find a compromise based on what you know. In Europe, you need to first, once someone takes a point of view, you need to understand where does it come from. Why does the person, or my Polish colleague, or Irish colleague, or whatever, why do they have this point of view? Why do they want this? I first need to learn that before you can present a compromise. So that remains the same.
Okay. Excellent. I have a final question that we pre-selected from Nanne Poyes over here.
Yes, thank you. My name is Nanne, and I was wondering which country intrigued you the most when you were there on a work trip?
Which country?
Intrigued you the most?
Hungary. I was the first foreign minister visiting the new foreign minister of Hungary, Anita Oban. Within the EPP group in the European Parliament, I worked together with the Tisha colleagues, also with Peter Magyar. And what intrigued me was not only the energy of her and the new government and everyone around it, but also in my conversations with NGOs, with think tanks, with students. There's so much energy there to really bring the country forward and to take new steps. Also knowing that we shouldn't expect everything from Hungary, because it's still the same country, with still a lot of the same views, with the same historical context, so they won't change 180 degrees. But they're willing to compromise now, they're willing to discuss now, and also look into the general interest. So that intrigued me most. No, I cannot say this. Yeah, so it was, yeah, that intrigued me most. The energy that at some point can return to a country to really believe in the future again. Yeah.
The minister will also join us at the reception afterwards, so perhaps he can still spill some beans
Yeah.
when he's off camera. Very good. I would like to now take questions from floor. I'll take 3 questions at a time. Just a reminder, as I said earlier, a question is 1 sentence and ends with a question mark. So please, no whole statements. We're collecting quite a few questions. I'm starting over there. Do we have a microphone? We have, I think, 3 questions in a row.
Okay, all right. So I'm also not a student. My name is Mariella Di Ciomone. I work for a think tank called the CDPM. We work on European foreign policy and European relations with the world. So my question to you relates to that. I think the role that Europe aspired to have in the world has changed dramatically in the last years for a number of reasons. But many countries still look at us for our values and also some of the things that we prize ourselves of. What is your aspiration in that area? What do you wish Europe represent in the world as it is today? Thanks a lot.
Okay, I think her neighbor had a question as well.
Hi, my name is Saskia Rietbroek. I'm not a student either. I work for the EU Sanctions Help Desk, which is a service that is funded by the European Commission, and I also work in the European sanctions field. My question is about the problems that the veto currently causes. That some of very important EU restrictive measures are not being passed because of veto of the current member states. How likely do you think that it is that the treaty will be changed to not only limit the veto rights of new acceding member states, but also the current member states?
And final question, I think another neighbor, yeah.
Hello, my name is Veronica, and I had just currently left my position as an advisor to the Minister of Labor and Social Protection of Moldova. So thank you for all your insights on the future of Europe as well as on the currently accessing states. Considering the Netherlands has traditionally taken a strict merit-based approach towards the EU enlargement, I was wondering what is your perspective on what would make Moldova a strategically important candidate for the future security and strength of Europe? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Minister Berendsen.
So first on foreign policy and how the rest of the world, how we should inspire the rest of the world. What our aim should be. I think, and I mentioned that in the speech as well. First of all, we need to realize that the world has changed, and no matter what we want to achieve on a global level, it will all depend on how strong we are at home when it comes to dependencies, etc. So that's a very important basis. Secondly, I think what we as European Union should work on together with like-minded partners is we benefit from a rules-based world order. And if those rules-based order disappears, it's the word of power that will rule. And trade countries like ours, countries that are defending human rights, rule of law, they will come under pressure. So that is something that is also part of our foreign policy, to how to cooperate with other like-minded countries to maintain this in a difficult situation the years to come. Not very likely that treaty change, because as I said, you kind of opened Pandora's box with treaty change, and to abolish veto, you need unanimity to abolish the veto. So that's a difficult situation as well. But we are, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that.
Yes, you're fine.
We will present some ideas on specifically this somewhere the coming days, together with some other countries in the European Union. Moldova, well, I've met Maya Sandu already in the European Parliament. I also welcomed her in The Hague. I mean, this is not about resources, population, geographical position, etc. If I would answer your question very shortly, it would say, the strength and the courage of the people. If you see how much pressure there is on Moldova, and how you're able, in cooperation with others, but Moldova, the Moldovan people, and the Moldovan government is able to keep on going with that pressure, I think that's something we could use in the European Union as well.
I'm going to now turn to my right, and I see also a couple of questions here.
Good evening. Dear Minister, thank you for this speech. Thank you, everybody. My name is Julia. I'm from Ukraine, and I've just graduated from a Master's in European Studies here. And my question might be similar to my colleagues from Moldova, but it's about Ukraine. So speaking about accession, of course, it's difficult. Of course, the war, considering our constant democratic struggle, I think you've followed it in recent weeks. Also, EU being fair and strict. But I wanted to ask, in your opinion, what is the priority and first and foremost challenge by solving which might bring Ukraine inevitably closer to accession?
The same row as another question, yes.
Yeah, thank you for the speech. I had a question related to, do you think we should have a stronger navy so we're able to, because the current maritime order seems kind of breaking down, so we're able to actually defend our shipping?
Asking that question to a Dutchman is a very good idea. I have one here in the just in your row before you. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the speech again. My name is Julian. I am a dual U.S. and Czech citizen, and so I wanted to ask a question about European and U.S. relations in the coming years, and particularly when it comes to the Netherlands. You talk about the Netherlands being very committed to things like clean energy, rule of law, democracy, things of this nature, equality. But as I've seen it in the US, those are all under attack in one way or another. And so I wanted to ask, how do you engage with the US on these particular issues that the Netherlands cares about? Do you look at it at a subnational level as well? And then what does it look like when it comes to post-2029 relations as well? Thank you.
Thank you. On Ukraine, well, as I mentioned, rule of law, anti-corruption, those are for the Netherlands, but in general, they're crucial issues. Of course, the difficult thing is that if more corruption cases come into the media or become public, it could also mean that combating corruption is better, because otherwise you would not have cases become public. So I've been in conversation also with NABU and SABU. These are the anti-corruption forces in Ukraine. There are steps being taken there, and I think that's important. But I also said, it's also really clear the very concrete added value of Ukraine already now, if you look at defense industry, modern warfare, etc. And the Netherlands is one of the biggest supporters of Ukraine, and we continue to do that. The Navy, very important. In general, we've, of course, very much increased our defense spendings, also to the Navy. And it's something we do also in cooperation with others. So the time that, the Netherlands had, their own individual land force, air force, Navy is behind us. We do it in cooperation with others. We have a very strong, all these fields were very strong as the Netherlands. We built that. We do it under NATO in cooperation with others, and we have very good cooperation also with the Belgians on Navy. And indeed, if you look at certain developments in the world, it's crucial that we do not forget that. Yeah. The US. The US has become less predictable for other partners. And at the same time, they remain a very, very important partner of us. Within NATO, also when it comes to trade, and also in good relationships, and we will maintain a good relationship with the US, you can also disagree on things. And we have conversations about that as well.
Maybe still on that question, because there's rule of law, there's democracy. You work in The Hague, and The Hague has a nice tagline, city of rule of law, right? We are the host country for International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court. What does it do to you personally as type of foreign minister of the Netherlands, with a responsibility lasting for more than a century, if the most important country in the world, which has for a long time pursued international collaboration, no longer finds that so important?
Well, for us, it's crucial. It was crucial in our history, and it's crucial for our future. And we indeed have a special responsibility as host nation for certain crucial institutions. The ICC is, of course, an important one. And I've already said publicly that, of course, these individual sanctions, these sanctions to judges, I mean, they need to be able to work, to do their work, to work independently, to work neutral. So we work on that. We defend the court, and we will continue to defend the court. And of course, as I said, the Netherlands, and with us, many other countries, can only thrive in a world where a rules-based order is still there.
Okay, clear. I'm still taking two last questions right in the middle. If we can get a microphone. All right, we have somebody over there.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Minister. My name is Dr. Manoj Bharadwaj. I'm from India. I'm the president of Emissions Trading Association of India. You mentioned about 4 points in your speech. You have signed a FTA with India, and particularly the Dutch-India strategic partnership roadmap. So I just want to ask you, how do you look at India as a strategic partner and a solution to the maybe problems of Europe and in general for the Netherlands? Thank you.
And then perhaps here on that side, there's still last question.
Hello, thank you. I'm Louise. I'm a first-year European law student. Europe increasingly sees AI as a matter of strategic sovereignty and security. How can the EU turn this ambition into action by building a generally European AI system? And talking also about practical matters, why are MEPs and European governments themselves relying on American digital tools further than weakening Europe's digital sovereignty? Thank you.
Thank you. India and AI. India, we welcomed Prime Minister Modi a couple of months ago, I think, or weeks ago, into the Netherlands. And we indeed have this strategic partnership, and we signed over 30 memorandums of understanding. And I mean, India is a powerhouse. It's a powerhouse. I will go there later this year to meet my colleague there. It's a cooperation that is very valuable for the Netherlands and for the EU. And especially when it comes to technology, energy, healthcare. I mean, there's so many topics where we can cooperate on, and we will. And the big challenge, but also my determination is, we signed a lot, but that's paper. We need to bring it into practice. And also my colleague Jaishankar, Minister Jaishankar, is very experienced. So also I learn a lot in the conversations I have with him. On AI, So these developments, they go, even if we think they go fast, they go even faster. The challenge is that the European Union, I mean, the European Union itself, it's a regulator. So we are quite good in setting rules, which are very important for the application of AI, to have the positives and, as you know, not the negatives. And we don't even know still yet what the positives are and what the negatives could be. But our challenge is that if we're good at regulating, we still need to make sure that we also develop that in Europe. And if you regulate too much, and in other parts of the world they do not have these regulations that they can develop, then in the end, they develop it, they will bring it to our market, and how much are we able to regulate it then? So we cooperate on that also within the EU. We need to go faster also with other countries in the world. And I think one of our we're a manufacturing continent. And there's a difference between the US and China. US is on AI really moving towards new ideas, the most advanced AI development, etc. And China is really looking at applying AI into their manufacturing industries. And I think that is something that Europe should do because of our manufacturing base. We should apply AI as soon as possible, and at the same time use all our knowledge, our universities, our bright minds to combine that with applying it. And I think there's our value with the regulation, but the world is moving so fast on this. So we need to be aware of that.
The world is moving very fast. And I think with that, we've come to the end of the Europe speech by Minister Berendsen. I think you've given us a lot to think about, both about Europe, India, the Navy, the whole world. Now, I would like to invite all of you on this occasion for a drink, which takes place in our bar in the university.